Hi everyone, I just wanted to do a video here. I wanted to add to the last video I uploaded and I forgot to put it in. This is a book from Henry Kissinger. It's called World Order, and the map he's used on the front cover of the book is an old map, and it actually depicts Hyperborea and it says Tartana. I'll show a clearer image. So if you look at the top of the globe or world map, it's got the island of Hyperborea, and then just below it is the word Tartata. So in my last video I was talking about how the Greek legend of Hyperborea was supposed to be the home of the mother of Apollo, and it had eternal sun. And the realm of Tartarus is said to be a realm of eternal darkness, a separation from the light. And I just had the thought that perhaps the concept of Tartaria, or the Tartarus being the pit, is a separation, a place that is of banishment. And in Revelation 20, we have the dragon, the devil, Satan, so that those names are being used interchangeably. And he's cast into the bottomless pit. The pit is abyssos, bottomless, unbounded, the abyss, the pit, immeasurable depth. The orcus, a very deep gulf or chasm. And in the Greek mythology, Tartarus is the deep abyss that is used as a dungeon of torment and suffering for the wicked, as a prison for titans. In the book of Genesis, Cain was banished to the land of Nod, and it says the land of Nod is a place mentioned in the book of Genesis of the Hebrew Bible, located on the east of Eden. So it's in the east of the Promised Land, so the east of Palestine, Israel, where Cain was exiled by God after Cain had murdered his brother Abel. Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. So he was removed from the light, he was banished from the presence of God. Nod is a Hebrew root of the verb to wander. Therefore, to dwell in the land of Nod can mean to live a wandering life. So much as Cain's name is connected to the verb meaning to get, in Genesis 4:1, the name Nod closely resembles the word nad, usually translated as vagabond. The Greek version of Nod, written in Nave, appears in the Onomastica Vaticana, possibly derives from the plural, which relates to resting and sleeping. This derivation, coincidentally or not, connects with the English pun on nod. So Josephus wrote in Antiquities of the Jews that Cain continued his wickedness in Nod, resorting to violence and robbery, establishing weights and measures, transforming human culture from innocence to craftiness and deceit, establishing property lines and building a fortified city. Nod is said to be outside of the presence or face of God. Origen defined Nod as a land of trembling and wrote that it symbolized the condition of all who forsake God. Early commenters treated it as the opposite of Eden, worse still than the land of exile for the rest of humanity. In English tradition, Nod was sometimes described as a desert inhabited only by ferocious beasts or monsters. Others interpreted Nod as dark or even underground, away from the face of God. Augustine described unconverted Jews as dwellers in the land of Nod, which he defined as commotion and carnal disquietude. So in Genesis 4 is the story of Cain murdering his brother Abel, and in verse 16 it says, "And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden." So he was removed from God and removed from the light to a place of darkness. And if we look at the Hebrew translation of Nod, so the definition, a region into which Cain wandered. So it comes from the Hebrew word Nowd, N-O-W-D. Nod, definition, wandering of aimless, fugitive. Wandering aimless. Nud, to move and to and fro, wander, flutter, show grief. In Job 2, verse 2, or should I say, we'll read verse 1. Again there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, From where do you come? Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro on the earth and walking back and forth on it. Is this referring to Cain wandering the earth in the land of Nod? Is Satan banished to this removal from God? These verses are connecting. So in John 8 verse 44 we have Jesus saying to the Pharisees, You belong to your father the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and father of lies. So the rest of the verse goes on Abraham's seed and Satan's seed. I know that you are Abraham's descendants, but you seek to kill me because my word has no place in you. I speak what I have seen with my father, and you do what you have seen with your father. They answered and said to him, Abraham is our father. Jesus said to them, If you were Abraham's children, you would do the work of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth, which I heard from God. Abraham did not do this. You do this. You do the deeds of your father. They said to him, We were not born of fornication. We have one Father, God. Jesus said to them, If God were your Father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God, nor have I come of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Because you are not able to listen to my word. You are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in truth because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and a father of it. But because I tell you the truth, you do not believe me. Now, some people say this refers to the Pharisees knowing that they are Abraham's seed, but they're not of their father, they're not of Jacob. Some people say that they are of the devil because they are Esau's seed. So it's obvious the similarity between Jacob and Esau and Cain and Abel. They're both brothers. One had the blessing of God and sought to please God, and one didn't. One sought to please himself. And Cain murdered his brother, where Esau wanted to murder his brother but didn't quite get the chance. I believe in the end he did forgive his brother, but it's still, through the blessings, there was still a rivalry between the families. So the stories of brothers in Genesis, Cain and Abel. Cain murders Abel because he gets the blessing of God. Isaac and Ishmael. Ishmael gets banished, again, and his mother get banished to the wilderness because they are causing problems between Isaac, who was the son of Abraham's first wife, Sarah, and the first chosen son, Jacob and Esau. Again, Joseph and his brothers. So Joseph's brothers sell him to slave traders. And in later times, it's Jesus. So the children of the Pharisees, the sons of Satan. So we have Cain representing Satan, Ishmael representing Satan, Esau representing Satan, and the brothers of Joseph representing Satan. And we have the Pharisees, the children of the devil, and they cast their brother out to die. The child and the dragon that tries to murder the child, and the dragon and the saints. So they're all murderers. Were the Nephilim sons of Cain? The Nephilim are a mysterious being or people in the Hebrew Bible who are large and strong. The word Nephilim is loosely translated as giants in some translations of the Hebrew Bible, but left untranslated in others. Jewish explanations interpret them as hybrid sons of fallen angels. The main reference to them is in Genesis, but the passage is ambiguous. The identity of the Nephilim is disputed. According to the book of Numbers 13:33, they later inhabited Canaan at the time of the Israelite conquest of Canaan. Now, a lot of people wonder about this because supposedly the Nephilim were destroyed in the flood, and now they're in the land of Canaan. But there could be an explanation to that, because if Cain was a son of God, a son of God's creation, Adam, and he was cast into the wilderness, and he married somebody who was not in the Garden of Eden. Whoever they were people outside of the Garden of Eden, and Cain married into them. And perhaps his descendants were these Nephilim, these hybrids. And after the flood of Noah, did the same thing happen? The children of Noah, they married other people, other tribes. So I'm just making a link that if Hyperborea is the land of the eternal sun, the home of where Apollo's mother came from, is this an ancient Greek version of the story of the Garden of Eden? That Hyperborea was actually the promised land of Eden before the flood, or possibly it was in the North Pole, and because of the flood it's been hidden or frozen over due to magnetic pole reversals or something, I don't know. And Tartarus is a land that is far removed from Eden, Hyperborea, and removed from the light of God, as Cain was banished from Eden to the land of Nod, a place that was removed. He was forced to wander like these nomadic tribes that live in the region of Tartaria. And let's not forget that the dragon or Satan in Revelation 20 is banished or is chained in a place of darkness, a place in the abyss that is removed from light, removed from God. The metaphor of chaining is that he is unable to roam free and impose his will on the earth, the people of the earth. At the end of Revelation 20, the dragon and the beasts are cast into the lake of fire. Now, this is a completely different place than Tartarus. It's a place of eternal destruction. The smoke of their torment goes up forever. I don't know if their torment is forever, but the smoke of it is. So I wonder why this particular map and picture was chosen for Henry Kissinger's book, World Order. And surely he would have had something to do with the decision of which front picture went on his book. It says reflections on the characters of nations and the course of history. So what are they telling us here? That Hyperborea is in the North Pole, and that Tartarus is the land south where the Central Asian nomadic tribes, Turkic nomadic tribes, lived. The Cathayas is the Chinese, the Mongols. So we've got northern Russia up here, but Tartarus is the same people that these Khazarian Empire come from. Is Tartaria a reference to being banished from the light of God as Cain was banished to the wilderness, to Rome, like Satan, to and fro in the earth until he was unchained, where he was able to return to the promised land, to the people of the earth, and to have his way over the earth. So I found a video that ties in with the Hyperborean Tartarian Tartarus mythology. It's about Agartha, which seems to be the Indo-Persian version of the Greek Hyperborea and Tartarus. And it's a really interesting video because it ties in a lot of other cultures who have all got the same story. And it all seems to be tying in with the pre-diluvian civilization and a hidden historical story of the abilities that they had and the technologies that they wielded. I'm going to play some of the video now. I'll leave the links below. It's worth watching the whole documentary. It's really interesting.
In India, a truly ancient legend that predates the Hindu religion tells of a large island of unparalleled beauty that long ago lay in the center of a vast Central Asian sea, just north of the modern-day Himalayas. A race of godlike people with strange powers lived isolated on the island, uncommunicating with the outside world, except through a number of deep tunnels which stretched out in all directions, each hundreds or thousands of miles long, burrowing underneath whole continents and even oceans. On this isolated island, society flourished at an extraordinary rate. Science and the arts developed peacefully, never threatened by wars or epidemics, remaining purposefully hidden to protect their wealth of knowledge from the calamities that habitually plagued their brothers and sisters in the outside world. But a tremendous force was soon to befall the earth, and even this utopia was doomed to destruction if they stayed their place. Perhaps a great flood or an invading force of epic proportions. The exact reason is not known. But the story tells that the people of the island escaped by moving their society into those tunnels and rebuilding their civilization entirely underground. No longer an island, but a subterranean kingdom, leaving no trace on the surface but the entrances to their tunnels, most caved in over thousands of years. For the purposes of our investigation, this lost empire will be known as Agartha. The hidden paths to Agartha that survived are still said to exist in the ancient ruined cities of India, such as Ellora, Elephanta, and the Ajanta caverns, as well as in other countries, such as in the recess of Afghanistan, in the Hindu Kush. This legend of the island is particularly strange, because if taken absolutely literally, obviously there is no ocean north of the Himalayas, but instead the Taklamakan and Gobi deserts. But if we took a trek into the arid, weather-bleached peaks of Everest, K2, or Kanchenjunga, you may be advised not to trip over the countless fish bones, coral reef remnants, and fossils of sea lilies littered across some of the tallest peaks. It's a lesser-known fact that the mighty Himalayas, often called the roof of the world, were once underwater, and that was the Tethys Sea. before the massive geological event known as a continental drift took place, and India collided into Eurasia, where it remains to this day. But what about those tunnels that supposedly stretch across the world? Why do parallel myths of gods or godlike people living in vast underground cities, protected from calamities above, appear in traditions and cultures across multiple continents, from Africa to America to Asia? Tracing its roots back to the dawn of civilizations and perpetuated by the men who, through eyewitness testimony, have claimed to have visited the lost civilization themselves within the inner earth. I'm Mr. Mythos, and I welcome you to Truth or Lore. Be sure to subscribe if you love the mysteries of history like I do. Every sub is a massive support to the videos I make on my channel. The concept of Agartha is deceivingly simple: an inner earth kingdom linked to every continent of the world by means of an extensive network of tunnels. But our investigation is not an easy one. For such an expansive and archaic topic that is typically skewed with conspiracy theories, the truth of a genuine inner earth civilization that may still exist today remains in obscure documents, the riddles of Buddhist lamas, and the lost teachings of a so-called cult of Agartha, all of which we'll be exploring in this video. And of course, tunnel mythologies across the globe. According to Saint-Yves, the hidden land of Agartha lies deep below the surface of the earth, somewhere in the mountain ranges of the Himalayas. This enormous underground complex of cities and a population of millions is ruled by a sovereign pontiff known as the Brahmatma and his two colleagues, the Mahatma and the Mahanga, upholding the highest of values in their authority. As protectors of knowledge, the entire collected wisdom of the ages is enshrined in its massive stone libraries, engraved in pillars in Vitanian script. He goes on to reveal that the Agarthian civilization was once above ground, but driven under and concealed from the rest of the world at the onset of the Kali Yuga, the present Dark Age cycle of Hindu chronology, around the year 3200 BC. Agartha is prophesied to reveal itself to the surface once again, but only once the world above attains spiritual balance in our governance. Long has this hidden civilization enjoyed advancement of technology at a greater pace than our own, including gaslighting, railways, and air travel. And when describing one of their most prominent technologies, Saint-Yves accurately predicts fiber optics over 1 century before their invention. He describes, quote, electrical pathways, not made of steel, but of flexible glass, which do not imprudently deplete the carbon reserves of the planet, nor saddle it with an iron framework no less conducive to the spread of some cosmic plagues. Though Agarthian society flourishes largely in complete isolation, they keep careful record of the discoveries of modern man, even from the remotest regions, by means of a vast network of tunnels that span across Earth. But despite this, Agarthians have evolved separately from the rest of the world for so many years that they developed 2 tongues with which they are able to speak 2 languages simultaneously, a detail Saint-Yves was particularly fond of sharing. As an unwavering literalist, Mission of India was not intended to be read as allegory or fantasy. The French occultist was dead serious in every word he wrote. and presented Agartha as a factual, geographic place that can be found if one knows where to look. Why did Alexandre Saint-Yves find this odd and outlandish idea of Agartha so irresistibly fascinating, but more than that, genuinely believable? We can take a guess that during his previous period of learning the Hebrew language and studying the Jewish tradition of Kabbalah for his work, Mission of the Jews, he came across the ancient revelation that not only was the Garden of Eden, an actual physical utopia located on Earth, but more accurately, deep within the planet, and could be reached by traveling through a cave. Specifically, this cave is the real-life location known as the Cave of the Patriarchs, branded by Jews as the Cave of Machpelah, and to Muslims as the Sanctuary of Abraham, serving as one of the most holy pilgrimage sites in both religions. Stated clearly in the Zohar, the foundational work of Jewish Kabbalah, as well as in other ancient sources from the region between Israel and the Dead Sea, the Garden of Eden should indeed be thought of as an inner earth kingdom. The timely parallel of Eden and Agartha should not be surprising though, as one considers that the belief in another, more holy world inside of our planet Earth is easily one of the most consistent motifs in mythology. I can hardly begin to count the number of ancient cultures which allude to the inner realms of Earth, if not an entire civilization that resides there. Just in North America, for instance, the Navajos believe that their ancestors emerged from a subterranean world under the Navajo Mountains. The Aztecs feel that they were one of 7 tribes that came out of the caverns of Aztlan. The leaders of the Creek tribes state overtly that the earth opened up in the west and the Creeks came out. The Pawnee story of creation tells that all living things came from under the ground. The Zuni believe that in the old days, all men lived in caves at the center of the earth. And again with the tunnels, there is an old Apache legend about a long and deep cave in Arizona which is said to lead to an inner earth kingdom inhabited by a mysterious tribe. I could go on about the legends found in Central America, South America, and in other continents, which I will expound upon later in this video, particularly with closer parallels to Agartha, such as the lost city of Shambhala, and especially those legends which describe a network of tunnels. But for now, I will leave you with this quote from the book Records of the Past, written by the influential Assyriologist Archibald Seiss. There is a dwelling which the gods created for the first human beings, a dwelling in which they became great and increased in numbers, and the location of which is described in words exactly corresponding to those of Iranian, Indian, Chinese, Eddaic, and Aztecan literature, namely in the center of the earth. Saint-Yves' second-hand account of Agartha probably would have been forgotten as a wild romp of the imagination if it weren't for a Polish scientist named Ferdynand Ossendowski, who, in 1922, published the book Beast, Men, and Gods, an account of his escape into Central Asia, fleeing from the Bolsheviks in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution. Dr. Ossendowski stated that during his travels in Mongolia, there were many times when both men and beasts stopped in their tracks, silent and still, often crouching, their attention fixated on the ground. He wrote, quote, "Earth and sky ceased breathing. The wind did not blow, and the sun did not move. All living beings, in fear, were involuntarily thrown into prayer and waiting for their fate." Eventually, he asked an old Mongol shepherd who he had become acquainted with what was happening in these moments. "Thus it has always been," the shepherd explained. "Whenever the king of the world in his underground palace prays and searches out the destiny of all peoples on the earth." Though the shepherd did not give a name for this place, he stated that there live the invisible rulers of all pious people, the king of the world, or Brahitma, who can speak with God as I speak with you, and his two assistants, Mahitma, knowing the purposes of future events, and Mahinga, ruling the causes of those events. He knows all the forces in the world and reads all the souls of mankind and the great book of their destiny. This story stuck with Dr. Ossendowski throughout his journey, and he would frequently stop to speak with Buddhist monks and lamas about traditions associated with caves, caverns, and tunnels in the region. On multiple occasions, a name for the place was given, the Kingdom of Agartha, which he himself dubbed the Mystery of Mysteries. This underground source was said to channel miraculous power to Tibetan monks and the Dalai Lama in particular, powers that outsiders could scarcely begin to appreciate. But still, there existed an even more powerful man than the Dalai Lama. This man being the king of the world in Agartha. His enormous power was such that he could destroy whole areas of the planet at will if he chose to, and it could equally be harnessed, for instance, as a means of propulsion for vehicles of transport. Modern readers of Ossendowski point out that his 1922 recounting is a possible prediction of nuclear energy, such as the atomic bomb and nuclear-powered aircraft, a real technology today which is still considered too dangerous for civilian use. There are many obvious parallels in Dr. Ossendowski's account and that of Saint-Yves. Most notably, the notion of a hidden subterranean kingdom named Agartha and its triple spiritual authority known as the Brahitma, Mahitma, and Mahinga, which are slightly altered spellings or pronunciations of Saint-Yves, Agartha, Brahitma, Mahatma, and Mahanga. At first glance, we may be inclined to think that Ossendowski simply plagiarized Saint-Yves, who wrote Mission of India 36 years before Ossendowski's account was published. This would be the obvious case, if not for a few factors. First, Dr. Ossendowski kept a daily journal and even brought back many items from his travels through Mongolia, thus providing evidence that his journey actually occurred. Second, he was investigated by the French philosopher and Vedic scholar René Guénon, who wrote that, quote, "He has affirmed to us that he had never read Saint-Yves, whose name was even unknown to him before the French translation of his book. And for our part, we have no reason to doubt his sincerity." Guénon, however, was not satisfied with his investigation and contacted his Eastern colleagues for more information, which he eventually compiled 2 years later in his book, The King of the World, which examined the legend of Agartha specifically. Compellingly, Guénon stated that, independently of the evidence offered by Ossendowski, we know through other sources that stories of this kind are widely current in Mongolia and throughout Central Asia, and we can add that there is something similar in the traditions of most peoples. And he again affirmed that Dr. Ossendowski's charge of plagiarism is wholly unfounded. Over those 2 years of independent research, Guénon had been informed of a vast underground network of caverns and tunnels, some running for hundreds of miles, which were thought to eventually lead to a true center of world governance, a place described very much like the legend of the island, surviving the ebb and flow of civilizations and catastrophes on Earth by remaining hidden deep underground, an impenetrable vault, of all of history's knowledge and wisdom. Near the end of his book, Guénon debates the ontological question of whether Agartha is a true-to-life geographic location, or perhaps simply a metaphorical concept. Here, he brings up a point that is often associated with Vajrayana Buddhism, which is that their concepts have both an inner and outer meaning. The inner, of course, implies that of deep understanding and spiritual attainment. The outer, however, plain and simple, is the notion that it actually physically exists, and in this case, a powerful and ancient kingdom hidden under the surface of the earth.
Okay, wow. So there's a lot going on in that video. A lot of information tying into ancient cultures and stories they have that all seem to match up. And a lot of this information seems to tie in around the Central Asian region, which is very interesting. This Tartarian lost history that we talk about, we'll use the term Tartaria. I don't believe it belongs to the current day people from Tartaria, but it's definitely referring to a hidden history and unexplained buildings, timelines. And, you know, I've even had the thought that it's possible that these buildings and streets that are full of mud may not even be from a liquefaction or earthquake. They may simply just be antediluvian buildings that have been dug out from the mud that, you know, a few thousand years later, however long ago the flood event happened. I mean, even in recent times, we have the pyramids almost buried under the desert. And I've heard it said that they've had to dig the pyramids out more than once. At some point in fairly recent time, Australia had an inland sea channel that was able to be navigated from the Gulf of Carpentaria all the way down to the Great Australian Bight. And this is a picture of, or an artist's interpretation or topographical map of if the sea levels rose 70 to 80 meters, what Australia would look like. We can see how the lowland areas would make it possible that there was a route going through that region that was possible for boats to travel through. But the map that they have of this route through Australia shows that something else has happened, not just a sea level rise or drop. It appears to be perhaps the plate that Australia is on, if plate theory is even real, has pushed up the central region of Australia, perhaps a great earthquake or something similar, and for some reason this area has drained the water out of there. Also, it's possible that Australia has the Artesian Basin in Queensland, underneath most of Queensland. There are lakes in Australia. There's one in Canberra that was full maybe 50, 60 years ago, and then just mysteriously dried up, and only this year has started to refill again. So this could be due to the underground water that the Bible talks about, the caverns of the deep rising and falling. The Tartarian Truthers channel just did a really good video on Australia's secret inland sea, but it just shows that something has gone on, something is being hidden. I'm not so much into the Tartarian story. I think it's a psyop, given the associations of who Tartaria was. I do believe in hidden history, hidden archaeology, timelines that have been messed with, and the millennial reign of Jesus. So I hope that given all this information, people start to realize that using the term Tartaria is incorrect and they shouldn't be giving away their history. Whoever made these buildings, whatever happened, this is the history of our ancestors. And let's not give the glory to these Tartarians because there is no evidence of this history in that region. But there does seem to be some ancient myths surrounding this region that are all tying up the myth of Hyperborea, Tartarus, Agatha, and several other underworld myths that link an island utopian nation that goes underground. And this story is widespread across all cultures, and it seems to be a very similar story, and some people believe it's literal. At the very least, it's a parable for what happened to humanity. It's obviously significant that Henry Kissinger found it important to put on the front of his book reflections on the character of nations and the course of history. If I think about the character of nations, our nations have been formed by the people that have controlled them, and the character of those nations have not necessarily been created by the people who lived in them. So, who steers the course of history? Who rides that beast that controls it? Perhaps the dragon being chained in Tartarus has something to do with Tartaria and the people that now rule our world that originated from this region. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next video.